Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And right now we are on a Saturn day, Mercury hour, with Mercury in the 11th house in the degree of murder, 22 degree. And this is in Sagittarius with the ruler Jupiter in Mercury, so this nice reception. Jupiter in degree of poison, 18 degree, so murder by poison. And I think the combination of Saturn, which rules death, Mercury, which rules chemicals, the 22nd degree of to kill and be killed, and Jupiter on 18th degree and Mercury, so poison. There's no better time almost than to talk about another discussion that we have with Pluto in Aquarius, which is forms of execution and end of life. So I have been looking at the product called Sarcopod. I've been following that for quite a while. If you know what I was dealing with, then you understand what spikes my interest. But basically, when we talk about testing new ways of execution that are more humane, then the death row will be the first place to go. Just like with medicine, we talk about holistic medicine or the medicines or frontiers in medicine. We think about, the terminally ill. So the death row and the death penalty countries would be the best to go. By the way, for people who are suicidal, for example, when I was in Netherlands, I had a roommate in the shelter. Then she was very likely spy, but the thing is that she said she really wants to go to Tilburg prison, but she will have to commit murder for doing that. And one day she felt really suicidal, so I went out and said to her, but don't kill yourself now, you won't get to go to jail. So I'm going to discuss the various topics that come up that I just ran into. And let's begin with the execution part. So there was an execution with the same method that is described at the Sarcopod, which is nitrogen death. And basically our air is made of 80% nitrogen. If we take out the 20% oxygen, there is a premise that would be a euphoric, intoxicating death. So, and that I heard testimonials of people where they were diving and they began to lose oxygen and they began to feel drunk and euphoric. Unfortunately, somebody saved them because they weren't aiming to cross the path. So if Saturn rules death as the ending of something, Mercury is the door, the psychopomp. And so the door, the passage, okay? And it also rules chemicals. So yes, I heard testimonies of people that were very happy with this and said it makes you want to say, okay, this is something that needs to be accessible for everyone. In Switzerland, there was a woman who printed, you have to do 3D printing of this Sarcopod, which by the way takes a month to print. And she did that, she paid for that, it's something like 15,000 euros. But because it is not yet legal in Switzerland, there are other methods of assisted suicide. People come, rich folks come to die there. But I think there are also funds. If I hear about funds that help with the funding of assisted suicide, whether in the Netherlands or in Switzerland, or with driving or going there, then that's definitely, it's also a cause that when I have money, I'm willing to contribute to. But the thing is that she printed that and everybody that was involved got arrested. She died successfully. But and with the Sarcopod, the interesting thing, it is closed. So it's kind of like you enter a transparent coffin and you can press a button that asks you if you want to kill yourself, and you press a button and nitrogen is released. Within a minute, you're supposed to be losing consciousness, and you can put the sacropod in nature or in a place that's supposed to give you euphoric death. So while people cannot like hold your hand upon death, and maybe there will be solutions to that, I don't know, or like maybe a glove that can go out or something like that, but you can maintain eye contact. It's supposed to be a minute, and it's supposed to be like a euphoric passage. Originally the sacropod was supposed to be used as a coffin, but because it's kind of like the cost effective and the fact that an ecosystemic, then they think that it might be used multiple times. Okay, energetically, I don't know. If it is euphoric death, I think it might not be a problem. This is like a crystal, okay? It holds on to energy. So all that sounds lovely until I watch a testimonial of execution in United States by nitrogen death, because usually they used to do carbon monoxide. And if you tell me, Shirley, it sounds like a gas chamber, don't tell me. Like, I'm the one saying this is lovely gas chamber, but kind of like, but humane. So in Germany, they used Cyclone B, which is a hydrogen cyanide, and that's not a lovely death. Okay, it was intentionally torturous. But here we're talking about a method that was supposed to be intentionally humane, and an execution that took place in United States as experimental. A person was wearing a mask, and still it took that person I think 7 or 8 minutes to die, and they were fighting against where they were tied because they're executed. So they were tied to the bed, and it's true they committed allegedly committed horrible crime and tortured and so on. But it's also true that this is a testimonial of people that saw the most horrible things they ever seen in life, that they witnessed this, and person 7 minutes, they're gonna be a trigger on this, I hope, dies in torture, basically. And that's not what we want for nitrogen death. That's not what we want for execution. That's not what we want at a time where we may have to execute a lot of people, and also by chance. So, for example, if I take a person like me that exposes MK Ultra, satanic abuse, blah 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 blah, I understand that those things they try to like reframe and put on. So it's very likely, and this is with my 22 Mars, to pay attention that if I talk about death, then I talk about death with dignity and not those methods, because I understand that I could be easily mistaken for a person that, or not mistaken, that would on purpose want to execute me in those ways, and I have to take it into account that that's one of the probabilities, which is another mercurial thing, is that you do such a thing, you expose, you talk about, you raise into awareness. Of course, there are all kinds of political forces operating, and you could end up dead. So it's something that I know, that I'm aware of, and it's a way of taking sovereignty, okay, to not let that stop me or keep me sick. And yes, so there we have a testimonial about nitrogen where it wasn't so successful, and so if that was used with the mask, one C factor that could play a part here, and we always look at C factors. Okay, what is the cause, what is an additional cause that we may have missed in the equation? And that C factor comes from consciousness. Obviously, a person who is executed, most cases, not all cases, does not want to die. So the C factor of consent is important here. And so the experience of a person who is consenting and desirous of dying could be a C factor. That being said, even if person consenting, when it takes 7 minutes and the person is convulsing and is not losing consciousness, then perhaps they did not lose consciousness not because of the issue of consent. And I tend to believe that this is so. It was not just a problem that he was executed and not willing consent died. And that is important for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to talk about another thing. So you read the comments and one person say, hey, but that person tortured people. Okay? So nobody thinks about the victim. First of all, no, nobody thinks about the victim. If they did, that person would not be satanically ritually abused in the first place, and that the victim would have a safety house and many, many, many other things. Okay, so and not only that, only the execution in jail takes years because they profit off of these people. They do forced labor, and you think, oh, it's fair that that person is da 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 da. Well, in Netherlands, we have had case of a judge and the drug lord that vouched for him. And this is Joris Demming, who was also, according to Hans Medma, Mol X. And this is allegedly, of course, in Supreme Court in Netherlands. And you have to have somebody who vouches for you, because if you're Supreme Court, you're going to have to put people in prison, and they're going to be top criminals. Not really, but allegedly. But they are going to be like people who committed murders and so on. And you need to have some criminal organization vouching for you. You also need to have something to deal with the trauma, which is drugs. Okay, so whether it's cocaine or whether it's MDMA. And that was a drug lord, Hussein Babysin. One day, Hussein Babysin was allegedly going to jail instead of Joris Demming for hurting children and murdering. And so very likely something was caught, and they have to do snuff films for the cult of the intelligence, that is the Rosicrucian thingy. And this is structure. Okay, so according to testimonials of whistleblowers of satanic ritual abuse survivors, is comprised of that. And if the judge gets caught, he still has to be judged. And what good for the cult is another act of betrayal. And so this is called that works and operates on courses, betrayals, inversions, torture, and whatnot to control people and humanity. And so when you think about, oh, what about the victims? Well, you don't know if that person was put in jail because instead of a judge that did such things. So or some intelligence person, because intelligence people, they are taught to kill in various ways. First of all, they need it, okay? They're taught to kill in various ways. We don't see with it with that. You understand in the experiment and training of, let's say, CIA agents or global intelligence or Mossad agents, okay? They have to kill people. They have to do tests on people. So such tests fail, right? So you have to put someone in jail. Have to solve the crime. Again, one person who tended to these cases where the wrong people are being put on murder is Peter Ada Vries. And way before the way he was assassinated, they took a child named Peter Oort, and that child was kidnapped, murdered, raped, and was kidnapped by a car. And the show car drives, it's a Purmerend murder. And it's Netherlands, so you have streets of painters, streets of this, but the streets were JFK, which would later be associated with Peter, and going from there to Churchill Street, which would be associated with both Wilders and Rutte. Like Rutte right now is supposed to play a sort of a Churchill role in the World War. So this was the Purmerend murder, and that showed very well to Peter that if he digs his nose too deeply into these things, this is what happens. Okay? And that case remained unsolved for 20 years, and on to Peter's death. And when I was angry that Peter vouched for Demming, I was shown this. It's like got a very angry response, and was shown this. It was actually, I think, on July 6th, where I was shown this, not this July 6th, but previous July. I don't remember. It's gone so much with water expense upon cooling, and so So it's important to understand that humane death penalty, other than the spiritual notion that people can cross over more easily and facilitate the fact that they will not have to, that they will learn from the mistakes if they did mistakes or whatnot. Other than such spiritual notions or humanitarian notions, very practical notions, you might get the wrong guy to be tortured over nothing. And that's something we always take into account in any penalty, definitely death penalty. And this is why death with dignity, also with execution, is intensely important for this to be humane. Other points that come up, why were the testimonials with the sarcophag and the execution different? Is there something to do with the method of execution, how quickly the gas is released, the space, okay? Those are things that are needed to be taken into consideration. So that paints another point of view of why sarcophag is still not legal in Switzerland, even though we have assisted suicide also for depression or mental cases, also in Switzerland, also in Netherlands, and that is that perhaps there is a question about that how humane is this. Generally, nitrogen hypoxia, I guess, is supposed to be this euphoric death. Practically, when it came to that execution testimonial, it wasn't. So these are all considerations. Another consideration we need to have is the fact that because of rituals of human sacrifice, a lot of people will commit murder, or at least try to commit murder, or commit betrayal in the state, or anything that will lend them an execution punishment. And this is because of the ritual sacrifice, okay? I think when I exposed for what my case was when I came to heal from cult abuse and went through even more intense cult abuse, is bringing this question, okay, again to the forefront, the understanding that the systems that are the junctures of where one could heal from that place or seek help are bombarded with ritual abuse, mind control, and perpetuation of trauma. So more thoughts that come to mind. The sovereignty issue, okay, when it comes to whether assisted suicide or execution. Naturally, I talk about, if you watched my previous episode, which I looked at a cold case of a woman that very likely ran off, or either it was manifested death for her, but the her motive was likely to be free from something, which may or may not have been poison inflicted, so that could be either or. And so when it comes to these things, I'm recording, not now. Unless you want to hear about death, suicide, execution, assisted suicide, gone. The Virgo stellium will always try to clean the plates. They're not malintending, but this may not be the healthiest thing for them. Anyway, I mentioned the thing, the important thing, that when it comes to decision to take one's life, even when it comes to physical ailments, because there are cures, okay? Terminally ill cancer patients, there is cure for that. Not chemo, not the weird things that they take and they convulse almost to death, and they call it holistic black something, I don't remember. Black death. but how curious for that. It's just bodies are stopping, and the door. We talk about Mercury as the psychopomp, and the door, the passage between this life and death. It is a door where you see things. Okay, you are exposed. One of the things I was first exposed when I looked at nitrogen in general, first of all, the number 7. That is the degree of my Rahu. Secondly, nitrogen in the soil. Apparently, when we put nitrogen fertilizers, it also kills the worms that are important to make nitrogen available for the plants. So we kill the soil when we put the fertilizers, just nitrogen, and it comes back to the air. I didn't know that. So in that doorway between a life and death, I have to admit, when the more I manifested, like tended to death, the more I discovered about life. Okay, and to die successfully is an art, and to live successfully is an art. And so the decision of whether you want to push a button to take your life, we understand that for most death causes, there is solution, whether they're physical, not physical. And the thing is, it's not that you're looking for a permanent solution to a temporary problem. This thing is that the problem could be permanent as far as the cult goes, unless we do something about this. Because if I take a look at, hey, why did I look it up today? Well, because I'm dealing with this Itamar Yaron weird energies, and I don't blame anybody. It's just like he's suffering, he's hurting people, and I was like, okay, let's look at sarcopag, sarcopag. I don't know, and then try to look at the soil, but it's like, no, I need to look at death more. So and I would be highly suicidal in that connection. That could be that he has like the 11th, bringing the 11th to my chart. I have the 22. Actually, my mother has the 11th in my 7th house. She has Mars in the 11th house. That could get me to think about the practicalities of suicide. So that's just chart to chart. Okay, I bring the 22. So, I don't know. Could get people to contemplate murder. Like, and understanding that astrologically, I think, is a more humane way of tending to it and remediating these topics of murder, assassination, and so on. Also, when regarding to the motives, okay, it's like, hey, there is an engineering here that is associated with that. What can we do with that? It is benefic. So that's how I did water expands upon cooling when Uranus was on my lot of spirit, which is also 22, Taurus. Okay, and that's when water expands upon cooling started. So, and at that doorway, we stand and we realize that is our supposed suicide is in fact murder, even if we press the button. And so the desire to live is, it's not like we're fighting between the desire to death or desire to live. No, it's desire to live and appreciation of life and understanding that this torture dumb fuckery is not life. And at the doorway, is that truth, which you can't escape. Okay? Therefore, the accessibility to the door is also important in maintaining life. Um, and no, this discussion about those who want to kill themselves will kill themselves, and they will run off a train or jump off a building or this or that. That's just the torture. That, like, just seeing that way is torturing them. Is perpetuating murder in a torturous way, not even in death with dignity way. And this death is also not suicide, it's murder. Because very likely, if that person had a safe place to be, or had the curation that does exist accessible to them, they would live. And this is an inevitable truth that permeates the lies and deception and betrayals and cult and deceit and fracture that our entire world has been established upon in modern times. And so, upon dwelling at the opening, standing at the door, opening that door, and even attempts of walking through that door, perhaps a doorway to life can be facilitated. And the light, when the light is shed, then those curations can be accessible. Both Masonic wise, the structures, the housing that we live in, the food that we intake, the soil, and the society. And I hope with this optimistic note, I will leave you and have a lovely Saturday.